Welcome back to The Line. New campaign finance reports were due this week, and political analysts are watching closely. But there are several ways to analyze the data, and Marjorie Childress of the New Mexico In-Depth points out in an article that the biggest donors seem to be legally getting around contribution limits. Donors can contribute more than the limits by not only personally giving to their candidates or their own campaign, we can talk about that, but by giving through companies they own or combining with family members who also give. And Laura, it seems like this is gamed a little bit to help out the wealthier candidates out there. If there's a lot of family and business wealth, you can really, as the article points out, you can really collect a lot of dough, and it's perfectly legal, but it seems kind of squishy. How does this hit you? Is it an unfair advantage once again for the wealthy, or how is this supposed to work out?
Well, I'm going to do the lawyer thing and parse what you said about legally getting around contribution limits.
Yes.
I mean, it's legal, so you're not getting around anything. That's
fair enough.
The limit.
I appreciate you saying that.
So you're not sort of. I think that's a headline-grabbing kind of soundbite that I want to untangle for a second, because that's how our system works right now, and everybody's using it. If we don't like it, I think it's important for members of the public to contact their representatives and get some sort of action to change it. But even just getting the limits of 5,500 in place a few years ago, if you're following that, was difficult enough.
Yes, it was.
And
even with
for the people
scandal.
who are coming up and running, it didn't apply to them.
Right.
So if you look at the last time when Martinez and Dennis ran against each other, a lot more money was being contributed, and you really didn't know whether it was part of different companies or not.
Right.
So I'm not sure this is a new issue by any means, but yes, a lot of money is being spent, and it's daunting for such a small state how much money gets spent in these races, but unfortunately that's the new normal. And what we're seeing is there are closely held companies where one family controls them, and in particular this article focused on Senator Cervantes and his holdings or his different family connections.
That's right.
But if you look at the idea of the First Amendment rights that companies have, in terms of being able to determine how to spend their money, I mean, it's legal. So we do have contribution limits. At the very least, you're able to see who contributed, whether it was a company or an individual. But it's not like we can say that Cervantes was the only one who did this. You can see this on every single one of them. And I think it's a concern that we're spending so much money. I'm less concerned about it coming from any individual sort of families, provided that it's being disclosed properly. I think when it's not disclosed, that's a serious issue.
Interesting. Dan McKay, Laura mentioned the 2009 fight, of course, controversy. We had kickbacks, we had all kinds of things. There was a lot of will to do something, but we've sort of incrementally gotten there since that time. But have those limits done what they were supposed to do at this point in your reporting? Have we gotten to a better place on these kind of things?
That's difficult to say. I feel like there's so much money and interest in politics that almost any rules you set up, it's like water flowing around a dam or behind, around a barrier. It finds a way, whether it's through a dark money group or through people contributing, with family members. It's very difficult to take the money out of politics, almost no matter what rule you've set up. The legislature and the governor have had a pretty hard time updating the campaign finance regulations, or at least coming to an agreement on it. So the Secretary of State has made some rules on her own, but there are important First Amendment issues involved. It's a very difficult topic for politicians to
absolutely.
handle.
Well, we got you here at the table. I got to ask you, you had a great report on, previously mentioned Mr. Cervantes and his legal challenges. I found that story kind of interesting. Tell us about that in some small detail here. What was going on there? What was the challenge, and why did Mr. Cervantes come out ahead on this one?
Well, you have to, if you don't receive enough support in a pre-primary convention among delegates, which is basically Democratic Party members, people who are participants in this convention process, you have to gather an additional number of signatures. So Cervantes gathered signatures to clear the threshold, but he was not that far above the requirement. Typically, candidates will try to get 50%, maybe even double the signature requirement, and he was much closer. So his signatures were challenged by another candidate, Jeff Apodaca, another Democratic gubernatorial candidate. The court case never actually got to the merits of whether he had submitted enough valid signatures. the judge ruled that that not all the parties who should have been notified about this case had been, that the Attorney General had not received the formal notice to participate in the hearing, and so the case was dismissed before anybody got to really the underlying issue. That appeal is still alive. Apodaca is still fighting and believes the judge made a mistake and that they should look at these signatures. From a practical perspective, I'll just say that they are running out of time. The ballots have to be set more or less by Friday, April 20th. So we'll see. We should have an answer soon on whether this moves
It's
forward.
fascinating. I'm glad you're putting a little work into this one, because there's something about this that captures the moment. It's kind of interesting. Dan, we kind of get back to this. We're talking about the amount of money one can give. Do you personally have an issue with this, that there are ways of giving? Because we're talking, Steve Pierce, a lot of people have gotten lots and lots and lots of money from holding companies and other things that are related to givers' wives and spouses. Is this okay for you? Is this a good way to do it? Or is this, again, tip the balance of fairness here on who gets money?
I don't think it tips the balance of fairness at all. I think it's like Laura said. I agree with Laura. As long as you're disclosing it, look, I could tell you as a legislator, if someone gave me a ton of money, one person, it made it difficult for me to do too much for them, because you've got the spotlight on you. If you took a ton of money from oil and gas, it wasn't hard for people to draw the parallels. Said, look, he's out there doing all this stuff for oil and gas, and he took all this money for oil and gas. Right. At least the constituents would know about it, and they could make a decision on it. What I find somewhat troubling is, as we're talking about these races specifically, once again, we continue to see this attack on family and individual success, right? I mean, you got a guy running for governor who's able to put his own money into the race. And for somehow that's a bad thing, that him and his family have been successful enough. The last time I checked, the Cervantes family has never been in trouble, never been indicted, never been accused of doing anything, untoward, never been in the drug business, anything. I mean, they've been in the ag business, real estate business. Joseph's been a successful lawyer, and somehow people are trying to twist this into, yeah, boy, the guy just makes too much money. And it seems
I hear that point, but I have to throw in, if you're able to loan yourself $1 million for a campaign, that doesn't seem like balance to me.
But that's because, and I don't mean this about you, but I'm going to say it to you because you're a big man, you can take it.
Sure.
That's because at the end of the day, I would say the same thing to you about someone that doesn't make any money and donates all their time. I would say, what is that person doing, not making a living and donating all their time to something? I don't see the parallel, right? Because that person has chosen to say...
Money is speech, money is different than
But so is
time.
actions. So is actions, Gene. One thing we never can get more of is time.
Yeah.
We can always get more or less money. And so I think at the end of the day, you got a guy running for governor who's putting his own money in there, doing what he does. Look, we had a guy run for mayor who was the champion of clean money, and the entire race was about him taking dark money. So, I mean, we've set this whole thing up to where at the end of the day, you got money coming in from all these organizations. We got one guy out there right now who says, look, I'm raising 99% of my money I'm self-funding. I'm putting the money in there. I think at some point people should turn around and say, well, at least the guy cares enough to put his money where his mouth is, and he's doing it. He's not taking all this dark money.
That makes sense. Well, I hear you on that one. Maybe we'll come back to that before this segment. Is this a disclosure issue at the end of the day? Let's assume Dan's correct here. You can spend what you want in your own raise. Is it a disclosure issue that Laura brought up earlier? Is that the problem here?
Well, one of the challenges I think in this context involving disclosure is that there are ways even around disclosure. If you have a closely held company and people don't, essentially know where the money is coming from, certain types of corporations can be set up and other entities can be set up to help disguise where the money is coming from. And so there's a real concern there that, and I think it's reflected in Marjorie Childress's article, that that disclosure may not be as complete as we would like it to be.
Right.
The other thing, though, is we rely on media and others to tell us when there has been a problem, because the average citizen does not have time to comb through the Secretary of State's website, does not have time to connect the dots. And there has been a real attack, no one will be surprised to hear me say this, there's been a real attack on media in this country. And we see a shuttering of media institutions, media organizations, et cetera. We're getting more and more information from fewer outlets, and there are fewer people working for those outlets. And as a result, our expectation, I think, has to be that even if there is more disclosure, it will still be a great challenge to actually get to that information.
There you go. What's the best route here for disclosure, do you think? I mean, again, if Dan's point is if you're going to be able to spend your own money on your own race and your family, and we don't have a problem with that, what's the best way to disclose these things? Because sometimes, as we know in companies, it's easy to hide who owns what, and you know what I mean? Whose holding company is beholden to who? It just gets very confusing. So what's the best way to disclose these things?
Well, I think it's going to be a process. I mean, if we, Dan talked about being beholden to any individual group, maybe when he was running and got a lot of money and whatever, but that was a time when there weren't campaign spending limits at all. I mean, you could get a ton of money from one industry or one company, and there was nothing against that. So I think we've come a long way from just 8 years ago when there weren't the limits, and now there are. And so at the very least, we have a limitation on that, and there is a requirement to disclose. I think if there is public will to move that forward, and it's very hard to do that within an election cycle. So if we're talking about the changes for this election, they're not going to happen. But if there's enough will for this, for it to happen in the next legislative session, I think we can, move the ball forward for it to be more clearly disclosed. But one thing I'll say, I do think that there's still some discomfort. I mean, I appreciate what Dan is saying, and the parallels he's trying to make about volunteering versus giving. I still think that for a state like New Mexico, where the average person, the median income is still pretty low, the average person does not have the means to participate in that way, and their only way to participate is to vote or to volunteer. I think there is still some discomfort with the idea of having somebody in that position who can self-fund something like that. I think we still want to see people who are able to obtain that kind of support from a variety of means, from people who actually are supporting them, rather than them just sort of buying that position. And I think that's where some of that discomfort comes from. Now, that being said, I know that Senator Cervantes is a very hardworking person. He's a self-made person in a lot of ways. He has a successful trial practice, and so he has sort of a different. I think he comes from a different cloth, I would say, than your average sort of billionaire that's in office in Washington,
I think being
D.C.
born in New Mexico helps you a little bit.
It helps as well, and so
having deep family roots in New Mexico.
But I do think that we appreciate the sort of self-made person, and I think there's still probably some discomfort with the idea of sort of using your own money to lend it to yourself, that sort of thing. So I can understand where that comes from.
Gene, I think it's important too. We talk about this. We talk about the Marjorie article and that there being this. I mean, there's no doubt when you read the article, it's very clear. I mean, Cervantes Enterprises, Cervantes Development, Cervantes Agribusiness. There's no, it's Whataburger running it through Walmart, running it through. I mean, the guy's family has worked extremely hard. And I'll just finish by saying this. I think it's a shame that we have a homegrown New Mexican that went to school in New Mexico, went to law school in New Mexico.
I see where you're going, but I don't think it's necessarily about Mr. Cervantes.
It is about Mr.
But there's
Cervantes.
others,
Apodaca
right.
has also,
That's right.
I mean, he's
That's
not,
right.
But the argument has been about the millions. Oh, he's put a millionaire. I'm not saying anybody at this table. The articles all seem to lead with what Joseph Cervantes has done. And I think at some point, the people in this state, in the state of New Mexico, the voters of the state of New Mexico, are going to realize that, what we can have homegrown successful people. We can have people that grow up here, stay here, and can help make New Mexico better. We don't always have to run out of state and find somebody. And that's not an attack on any of the other candidates.
I got to wrap this segment, but there's an American thing here. It's so interesting that if you have dough, somehow you're more legitimate as a candidate. It's an interesting thing here. If you're self-made,
I'm not sure that's the case.
Well, we saw that argument about
know,
Donald Trump, didn't we?
Right, exactly.
He's not going to be, and he made this argument, he's not going to be beholden to any special interest because it's his own money. And then we find, of course, that that's just not the way that it's played out.
This is not about Mr. Cervantes. He has done great work and done great things, but I hear you on the bigger points.